The air is thick with anticipation, a kind of stillness that only comes before something historic. The lights cast a soft glow over the stage, illuminating a podium that has seen the voices of presidents, senators, and world leaders before. But tonight, the man standing before it is none of those things. Tonight, the voice that will break the silence belongs to someone the world has seen but never truly heard. Barron Trump steps forward. A hush falls over the crowd. Skepticism lingers in the air, mingling with curiosity. For years, his existence has been a subject of speculation, a figure painted by the media but never defined by his own words. To many, he has been a mystery, a name without a voice, a silhouette standing in the background of history. He has never sought attention. He has never spoken publicly. He has never answered the world's questions. Until now. His hands rest on the podium, steady, unmoving. He scans the room, not with hesitation, but with an awareness that this moment is bigger than him. He exhales, a controlled breath, a gathering of thoughts. He doesn't need a teleprompter. He doesn't need notes. The words he is about to speak are not rehearsed. They are real. They are his. He looks out at the crowd, his voice calm, unwavering. For years, people have spoken for me, he begins. They've told my story without ever asking for my version of it. They've decided who I am without ever hearing a word from me, and I've let them. A pause. The silence in the room is no longer just anticipation, it is reflection. But today, he continues, his voice growing steadier, that changes. The murmurs stop. The weight of his words settles. He isn't here to follow a script. He isn't here to prove a point. He is here because, for the first time, he is ready to speak for himself. The world watches. What comes next will leave them speechless. The silence in the room is absolute. Not the kind of silence that lingers out of politeness, but the kind that signals something deeper, an unspoken realization that something significant is unfolding. The air is charged, the weight of expectation pressing down on every individual in the audience. Barron Trump's gaze sweeps across the room, not hurried, not nervous, but deliberate. He lets the moment breathe, lets the weight of his first words settle. I have spent my life in the shadows of perception, he says, his voice calm yet resolute. For years I have been a name without a voice, a story written by others before I ever had the chance to tell it myself. The audience sits still, listening, absorbing. He is not reading from a teleprompter. There is no script. What he says now carries the weight of truth, unfiltered, untouched by political handlers. People have looked at me and assumed they knew my future. They saw my last name and decided what that meant. Some called me privileged, some called me irrelevant, but how many of them ever stopped to ask, who am I really? A murmur ripples through the crowd, not of dissent, but of contemplation. He isn't defensive. He isn't defiant. He is something much more dangerous to those who doubt him. He is undeniable. He continues, voice steady, words measured. I have listened to what the world had to say about me. I have watched as people created an image of me that fit their expectations, but I never spoke. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was waiting for the right moment. He exhales, his fingers pressing lightly against the podium. And that moment is now. The tension in the room shifts. It is no longer skepticism. It is a realization. For the first time, Barron Trump is not an extension of a legacy. He is his own voice. The air in the room changes. It is no longer filled with skepticism, nor is it weighed down by expectation. Instead, it carries something different, recognition. The audience, the journalists, the political analysts who came here expecting a speech crafted by advisors now realize that this is something else entirely. This is not a performance. This is a reckoning. Barron Trump stands firm, his voice steady, his words deliberate. For too long, people have spoken about me, but never to me. They have assumed. They have judged. They have written my story before I ever had the chance to live it. But today, I take that story back. A ripple moves through the crowd. He is not asking for approval. He is not seeking validation. He is making a statement, one that no one in this room expected. I have been called many things. I have seen the headlines, the assumptions, the opinions passed as facts. They've called me sheltered. They've called me silent. But silence is not absence. Silence is not ignorance. Silence is observation. The words hit with a force that is impossible to ignore. People shift in their seats, realizing that this is not just another political son standing at a podium, delivering hollow words. He continues, his voice unwavering. The world taught me to listen before I speak, and I have listened. I have listened to the way people form opinions without knowing the full story. I have listened to how we divide ourselves before we try to understand each other. I have listened to how easy it is to label someone when you've never once met them. The audience is no longer passive. They are engaged. They are invested. Barron leans in slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. So let me ask you, how many of you have made up your minds about me before this moment? How many of you thought you knew who I was without ever hearing a single word from me? The silence that follows is not just quiet, it is deafening. For the first time, Barron Trump is not just standing in front of a crowd. He is making them think. The stillness in the room is no longer passive. It is charged, tense, brimming with an unspoken truth that no one dares to voice. Barron Trump has not raised his voice, yet he has commanded the attention of an audience that never expected to be moved. The weight of his question lingers in the air, pressing against every individual who had once assumed they knew who he was. He does not let them look away. You see, he continues, his tone unwavering, we live in a world where perception is treated as reality, where headlines define people before they ever speak, where names come with assumptions that are rarely questioned. A journalist sitting near the front shifts uncomfortably. A political analyst lowers their gaze. He has said something they cannot deny. Barron exhales, measured, composed. I have watched as people reduced me to nothing more than a last name. I have seen the way assumptions are made, not just about me, but about all of us. People are placed into boxes before they even have the chance to prove who they really are. The room is silent, waiting, absorbing. He pauses, then continues. But I ask you, what if we looked beyond the labels? What if we stopped letting others tell us who people are supposed to be, and instead let them show us for themselves? It is not just a challenge, it is an indictment. He lets the thought settle before he delivers the next blow, the one no one expects. For years, while the world debated who I was working. Not for cameras, not for attention, but because I believe actions will always speak louder than words. A murmur spreads across the room. This was not in the narrative they had crafted for him. This was not what they expected. Barron leans forward slightly. And so I ask you again, if I did not have this last name, would you have cared to listen? The question lands like a hammer. It is not rhetorical, it is piercing, undeniable. No one speaks, no one moves. The shift has happened. Barron Trump is no longer just standing at the podium. He has shattered the illusion that surrounded him. The silence stretches, no longer just an absence of sound, but a reckoning. The people in the room are not just listening, they are realizing. The carefully constructed narrative they had built around Barron Trump is falling apart, crumbling beneath the weight of his words. He watches them, not with arrogance, not with defiance, but with quiet certainty. For too long, people have believed that a name is enough to define a person, that who you are born to determines who you become, that if you are silent, it must mean you have nothing to say. The murmurs are gone now. The skeptics, the critics, the ones who had come expecting a rehearsed, hollow speech, they are the ones now struggling for words. Barron doesn't stop. I was never interested in proving people wrong, he says, his voice even, measured, because people's assumptions were never my burden to carry. The truth is simple. People believe what they want to believe. They see what they want to see. A pause, a breath. a moment to let that truth settle into the spaces where judgment once existed. But I am not here to be what you expected. I am not here to play the role that has been written for me by strangers. I am here to tell you that perception does not equal truth. The audience is transfixed. And if my last name was different, if I was just another young man standing before you today, speaking these same words, would you still listen? Would you still care? The weight of the question is unbearable. The journalists shift, the cameras zoom in, the world watching holds its breath, because they all know the answer. Barron Trump does not give them an easy way out. He does not let them escape the truth that has now taken hold of the room. And then, with a calmness that carries more power than any raised voice ever could, he delivers his final words. This is not just about me. This is about all of us. We decide who we become, not the headlines, not the expectations, not the assumptions of people who have never walked in our shoes. The moment has changed. And so has the way the world will see him forever. The silence is not just in the room anymore. It has spread beyond the walls of the auditorium, beyond the cameras broadcasting the speech. It has reached living rooms, newsrooms, and the millions watching across the world. This was supposed to be another speech, another headline, another carefully crafted moment in the never-ending cycle of political discourse. But it is none of those things. Barron Trump stands at the podium not as an extension of his family, not as the quiet son of a former president, but as something else entirely. A man who has just shattered every assumption made about him. The applause starts slowly, hesitant, unsure. And then, like a wave crashing against the shore, it builds. First one person, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire room is on its feet. A standing ovation that is not forced, not out of obligation, but out of something. Rare respect. The cameras flash, capturing the moment that no one saw coming. Reporters scramble to rewrite their stories, networks rush to reframe their narratives, and political commentators fumble to analyze what has just happened. Because no one predicted this. The headline shifts in real time. Barron Trump delivers. Speech of a lifetime. Not just a name, a voice that shook the nation. America witnesses the moment Barron Trump stepped into his own. But Barron? He doesn't linger. He doesn't soak in the applause. He simply steps back, nods once, and walks away. Because he doesn't need to say anything else. Some moments don't need follow-ups. Some moments speak for themselves, and this is one of them.